When the headlines first flashed across timelines announcing Remy Ma and Papoose's split, it looked ordinary. Just another celebrity love story collapsing under the spotlight. Another breakup. Another gossip cycle. Another couple people assumed simply grew apart. But that surface narrative, it was a lie. Because behind closed doors, far away from the cameras and anniversary posts, Remy had allegedly been carrying the weight of a secret for years. Protecting him. Guarding an image that wasn't nearly as perfect as fans believed. Staying silent through whispers of betrayal, shady money moves, and arguments so tense they could crack the walls. While the public praised him as the loyal husband of the century, she was quietly cleaning up messes nobody else could see. For the culture, they were untouchable. The poster couple. The gold standard of black love. People romanticized them like a fairy tale, reposting their photos like proof that loyalty still existed in the industry. But now, with fresh receipts surfacing and old stories crawling back into the light, that fantasy is starting to look staged. And suddenly, everybody's asking the same uncomfortable questions. What was really happening when the cameras turned off? What did Remy keep swallowing just to protect that brand? And why did the truth stay buried for so long? From day one, Remy and Papoose carefully built that image. It wasn't accidental, it was strategic. A narrative crafted piece by piece. The ride-or-die wife. The devoted husband. The unbreakable bond. Remy especially carried that aura like armor. She stepped onto the scene like a storm out of the Bronx, bold, sharp-tongued, street-hardened. Terror squad energy running through her veins. There was nothing soft or manufactured about her presence. She had that rare mix of danger and magnetism, the kind that made people nervous and obsessed at the same time. Power. Beauty. Realness. She didn't try to command rooms. She just walked in and they belonged to her. And when she spoke, nobody ignored it. You the dumbest broad of the year. The messiest one too, she snapped once, voice cutting like glass. I should start handing out awards myself. Mailing them straight to you clowns. The insults weren't jokes, they were warnings. I'll make a whole trophy with your name on it, she kept going, unfiltered, unapologetic. Got something special for anybody obsessed, anybody lurking, anybody trying to play games. It wasn't entertainment.it was territory. She made it clear, don't test her. But lately, something shifted. People started noticing a strange energy in the background. Subtle at first, then obvious. Claressa. Fans couldn't ignore it anymore. The tone, the swagger, the sudden confidence that felt borrowed. Like she was studying Remy's blueprint a little too closely. Copying the walk, the attitude, the vibe. And the internet clocked it immediately. Because you can imitate the style, but you can't fake the presence. And that's when the whispers really started. Because when someone begins mimicking the queen, it usually means they're trying to take her place. That fearless confidence, that gritty elegance, that unmistakable street royalty energy, that was all Remy. Nobody had to hand it to her. She took it. Every room she entered felt charged, like something dangerous and glamorous had just walked through the door. Papoose, on the other hand, carried a completely different aura. Quieter, sharper, calculated. In the underground circuit, he wasn't flashy, he was respected. Known for razor-blade wordplay, discipline, and that calm, almost intimidating presence that didn't beg for attention but still demanded it. The kind of man who didn't talk loud because he didn't have to. So when Remy's star started rising, it wasn't just about romance. She couldn't afford just any man standing next to her. She needed someone solid. Someone secure enough to let her shine without ego getting in the way. Someone who wouldn't compete with her glow or try to dim it. And that's exactly how Papoose was introduced to the world. Not the rival, not the jealous partner, the supporter. The calm to her fire, the balance to her storm. His whole image was built around one thing, standing beside her, not over her. Never stealing her spotlight, only enhancing it. The man strong enough to walk next to a powerhouse like Remy Ma without losing himself. And over time, that reputation became his identity. It shaped how fans saw him, how the media talked about him, how their entire love story was marketed. But here's the part people conveniently forget. That perfect husband narrative? It didn't start after the wedding. It started way before. Back when Remy was at her lowest. Back when everything fell apart. To really understand how deep the story goes, you have to rewind the clock to 2007, a night that still lingers like smoke. A heated argument. A close friend. Money on the line. Tempers flaring outside a Manhattan nightclub. Makeda Barnes-Joseph. What started as words escalated fast. Too fast. Voices turned sharp. Pride got bruised. And then, gunshots. Chaos. Makeda injured. Sirens screaming. Cameras flashing. And Remy suddenly facing charges that weren't minor. Assault. Illegal weapon possession. Serious time staring her in the face. One night. One mistake. Everything changed. The judge handed down 8 years. 8. Her world shrank from stages and studios to cold walls and steel doors. She ultimately served about 6 thanks to good behavior and public support, even heavyweights like 50 Cent speaking up for her. But still, 6 years is an eternity when your career is on fire. Most artists disappear after that. But something strange happened while she was locked away. That's when the legend of Papoose started growing. While Remy was behind bars, his loyalty became almost mythical. The story everyone repeated sounded unreal, visiting her nearly every day, showing up so often the guards knew him by name, sitting in those sterile rooms for hours just to see her face. It got so excessive that Remy allegedly had to tell him to slow down. 3 times a week is enough, she told him. But that tiny detail? It turned into folklore. Fans ate it up. Because in a world where people leave when things get hard, this man stayed. He'd even joke about everyday married life like it was normal, forgetting to take out the trash, rushing outside half asleep, setting off alarms, talking about raccoons tearing through garbage bags while calling her the queen. Regular husband stuff. Domestic. Loyal. Safe. Black love forever, he'd say. I ain't going nowhere. It sounded wholesome. Almost too wholesome. And during those prison years, no solid cheating scandals stuck to him. Sure, whispers floated around. Rumors of a secret baby. Side stories. Messy gossip. But nothing ever got proven. Nothing concrete enough to break that halo. And considering how women behind bars rarely get that kind of loyalty, let's be real, most get forgotten. Papoose's devotion looked superhuman. Unreal. Almost too good to be true. So by the time Remy finally walked out those gates, the public had already crowned him the ultimate loyal husband. The gold standard. The blueprint. And that image? It became his golden ticket. After her release, they were everywhere. Interviews, radio shows, sit-downs, podcasts, red carpets. Every platform telling the same story. His loyalty, his sacrifice, his devotion. Over and over, Remy started getting framed like the lucky one. Like she'd hit the jackpot. And Papoose? He became the poster boy for what a real man was supposed to look like. Faithful, patient, unshakable. The industry practically worshipped him. Which is exactly why, when everything later exploded between Remy, Papoose, Claressa, and Easy the Block Captain, people didn't just raise eyebrows. They froze. Because it didn't make sense. From the outside, it looked like Remy had walked away from something unbreakable. Like she threw away a once-in-a-lifetime kind of love. And the public couldn't process that. But here's the thing about fairy tales. They only work when nobody asks questions. The second receipts start dropping, the illusion cracks. And once people started looking closer, really looking, that perfect story started collapsing fast. Then came that clip. Fat Joe talking casually. Almost slipping. But if you listen carefully, there's a detail hiding in plain sight. He said, "All I know is I left y'all the night before." Not him, not just Papoose. Y'all. Plural. Meaning Remy and Papoose were still together. Still moving as a couple. Still showing up side by side publicly right before everything blew up. That tiny word? It changes everything. Because it proves something crucial. Right before the chaos started, Papoose was still playing the role. Still showing up. Still wearing the mask. Once you really clock that detail, everything Remy said afterwards stops feeling reckless. It stops sounding emotional. And starts sounding like a reaction. Like someone who wasn't lashing out, but finally snapping after holding too much in for too long. Because here's what people forget. Fat Joe isn't some random commentator tossing out guesses for clicks. He's not a blogger. Not a stranger. Not some industry outsider trying to piece things together. He's family. Day one circle. A generational link. Somebody who's been in the trenches with both of them long before the cameras, long before the marriage branding, long before the internet turned their love story into a fairy tale. Joe knows what happens behind closed doors. He knows the real dynamics. The history, the codes, the loyalty. That's decades of shared struggle and survival. So when he talks, it hits different. Because people like him don't speak loosely. Which is exactly why Claressa never really fit into that world. Not culturally, not socially, not generationally. It always felt off. Like somebody trying to force their way into a room that was built years before they even showed up. And let's be honest, when you try to insert yourself into a bond that's been cemented over decades, while your own connection is still fresh and fragile, that foundation cracks fast. Every time. From a purely analytical standpoint, the whole Claressa, Papoose situation looked unstable from day one. Too rushed. Too loud, too messy. It didn't feel organic. It felt reactive. Like two people bonding in chaos, not building something real. And relationships born in chaos usually don't survive peace. So when the fallout finally came, nobody who was really paying attention was shocked. Because once you study the timing, the rooms, the players involved, the puzzle pieces slide together almost too perfectly. At some point, the story stopped looking confusing and started making uncomfortable sense. Then the public unraveling began. It only took one rumor to light the match. Word spread that Papoose allegedly knocked out Easy the block captain over an affair with Remy. No confirmed footage. No official report. Didn't matter. Because once the internet smells drama, it doesn't wait for proof. It builds a narrative. And that narrative spread like wildfire. Social media picked a side instantly. And Remy? She got dragged straight into the fire. Non-stop. Memes, threads, think pieces, strangers dissecting her life like entertainment. They painted her as the ultimate betrayer. The villain. A woman who supposedly cheated on the perfect husband the world had been worshipping for years. A younger artist. A secret affair, and the loyal, ride-or-die man humiliated. It looked bad. Cinematic levels of messy. Even fans who loved her hesitated. Because the version they were fed felt too scandalous to ignore. And that one-sided story? It stuck. For a while, that was the only version people believed. Until Remy got tired. Tired of staying quiet. Tired of carrying blame. Tired of protecting everyone but herself. So she started pushing back. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody likes to say out loud. Remy helped build that perfect image too. She wasn't just trapped by it. She participated in creating it. For years, she defended Papoose. Covered for him. Smoothed things over. Made sure any cracks stayed hidden. She protected that perfect husband brand like it was her own. So when everything flipped, the public couldn't process it. Because to them, she didn't look hurt. She looked guilty. And it wasn't an accident. When you help build a brand that powerful, you inherit the consequences too. Once the illusion breaks, it's almost impossible to convince people there was more to the story. People don't like having their fairy tales ruined. So they'd rather blame the woman than question the myth. That doesn't mean Remy was wrong. But it explains exactly why the backlash hit like a truck. Then things escalated. Fast. Because Remy didn't just deny the rumors. She came with receipts. And that's when the internet lost its mind. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was evidence. First batch of messages drops. And everybody freezes. Claressa in Remy's inbox. Asking for advice. How to dress, how to style her hair, how to level up her look, how to present herself more feminine. Almost like she was studying Remy. Trying to mirror her. Learning the blueprint. The same woman now linked to Papoose, once asking Remy how to glow up like her. That alone was wild. But then came the second batch. And this one hit harder. Papoose. Begging. Needing validation. Needing attention. Asking for affection. Flowers. Calls. Reassurance. Not the unshakable, stoic husband people imagined. But someone desperate to be chosen. Needy. Human. Cracked. And then Remy adds another gut punch. Talking about how her son stayed with his father and her mother while she was locked up. How she was still sending money from prison. Still holding everything together from behind bars. That contrast? It hit like a bomb. Because now the perfect husband story didn't look heroic anymore. It looked complicated. Messy. Maybe even performative. And when you remember what Fat Joe said, that Papoose had just been out with Remy the night before everything exploded. The timeline suddenly lines up too cleanly to ignore. Like pieces finally snapping into place. Like the truth had been sitting there the whole time. Waiting for someone brave enough to say it out loud. Suddenly, everything about Claressa started looking different. The nervous energy, the constant need to prove herself, that hunger to be noticed. It wasn't confidence. It was insecurity screaming through a megaphone. Up until that point, the public was still trapped inside the same tired narrative, the heartbreak story. The clean, simple headline everybody could digest. Remy ruined black love. Remy cheated. Remy destroyed the fairy tale. That's the version people clung to because it was easy. But then Claressa did something nobody expected. She didn't stay quiet. She didn't stay in the background. She stepped straight into the spotlight, jumped into the group chat, and started firing shots at a man's wife like this was some kind of online sparring match. And just like that, the entire story flipped. Because now it wasn't just betrayal. It was chaos. And then Easy the block captain started talking reckless too, which only poured gasoline on a fire that was already out of control, especially with those rumors floating around that Papoose had allegedly knocked him out. At that point, this wasn't a celebrity scandal anymore. It felt like a collision. Ego slamming into ego, insecurity clashing with pride, old resentment finally boiling over. Years of tension exploding all at once. And, let's be honest, Claressa somehow managed to turn this entire situation into one of the most unhinged relationship train wrecks we've seen since Crazy Rock and Blueface. And that's saying something. But instead of just piling jokes on top of the mess, you have to slow down and really examine what's happening. Because when drama gets this loud, this public, this ugly, it's rarely about love. It's about imbalance. Unmet needs, bruised egos, people chasing validation instead of connection. And Claressa? She looked like she was drowning in all of it. So now you have to look deeper. Not to attack anyone, but to understand the psychology behind the explosion. Validation versus belonging, power versus proximity, ego versus security. Those are the real battles. Those are the things that turn relationships into war zones. Once you strip away the gossip and noise, the picture gets clearer. Messy, but clearer. Then Remy dropped the bomb that really shattered everything. She revealed something nobody saw coming. She said she was the provider. Even while locked up. Even from prison. She was still the one funding the lifestyle. The bills, the stability, the polished, perfect couple image the world admired. That came from her money. And when that truth hit, the fairy tale didn't just crack. It collapsed. Because loyalty looks very different when the woman is carrying the financial weight. Suddenly, it's not romance. It's dependence. It's survival. What looks like sacrifice might just be necessity dressed up as devotion. And that's where the timing gets real suspicious. Because the moment Remy kicked Papoose out, the moment the money stream dried up, he suddenly started getting real close to Claressa Shields, a woman with her own serious bag. Now does that automatically prove anything? No, but it definitely raises eyebrows. Because when security disappears in one place and magically reappears somewhere else, you have to ask questions. Is this love? Or opportunity wearing a romantic costume? At that point, the story stopped being about heartbreak altogether. It started looking like strategy. Power, access, positioning. Then there's something most people completely ignore. Follow the money. Back in 2006, Papoose proudly bragged about signing that $1.5 million deal with Jive Records. He called himself the $1.5 million man for years. But think about it. 20 years later, and he's still flexing the same advance check. That's not a victory story. That's a question mark. According to him, he took the advance, then basically walked away from the deal without finishing the project. Said he already got what he needed. But in the music business, that's not a boss move. That's a red flag. Because it suggests the goal wasn't longevity. It was the payout. Opportunism over ambition. And when you line that up with Remy later saying she was the real provider, the pattern starts rhyming a little too well. Then there's the part where he publicly bragged about taking care of her kids and holding her down financially, while also having power of attorney over her money. But if you're spending from someone else's account, that's not generosity. That's access. You're not a hero. You're a manager. Turning stewardship into self-praise? That's not noble. That's suspicious. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about patterns. And the same pattern keeps showing up in the deals, in the marriage, in the finances, and now in these new relationships. Even both sides admitted they weren't perfect. Both Remy and Papoose confessed to cheating at different points. So this isn't angel versus villain. It's choices, consequences. But let's be real, any woman would lose her mind coming home to a man who burned through her money, entertained other women, and still had full access to her life. And people keep skipping one key fact. They weren't distant. They still had conjugal visits, still had intimacy, still had chances to fix things. Opportunities to choose loyalty. And he didn't. Which leads to the question Claressa should really be asking herself. If a man couldn't stay faithful to his wife, a woman he shared history, money, vows, and prison visits with, what makes you think he'll stay loyal to you during a 6-week training camp? That's not hate. That's math. And when the math doesn't add up, fantasies collapse fast. This doesn't read like romance. It reads like projection, hope, denial crashing into cold reality. Then when Papoose started accusing Remy of messing with an old prison mate, it felt desperate. Because by then both of them had already moved on. He had Claressa, she had Easy. So why throw in another wild accusation? Simple. Deflection. When someone starts losing control of the narrative, they stop arguing facts. They start throwing dirt. Shock tactics. Anything to make the other person look worse. Because this wasn't threatening his heart. It was threatening his identity. Black love wasn't just a slogan. It was his brand, his crown, his image. And once that loyalty story cracked, the armor came off. So now it's distraction mode. Shift attention, reframe the story, protect the reputation. But the shine doesn't hit the same once the truth leaks out. Meanwhile, Remy stayed low-key, working, moving quietly. But every time he tried spinning the story, she came with proof. Timestamped videos, receipts, showing she was home with her baby, not where he claimed. That's not clout chasing. That's someone tired of being lied on. Yet Claressa still doesn't seem to see the warning signs. Still riding hard for a man whose history keeps repeating itself. And then Remy dropped another name. Another woman. Cali girl. Spotted on trips. Around the same time. Same spaces. Another overlap. Another timeline that doesn't lie. At that point it wasn't confusion anymore. It was confirmation. Not mistakes. Patterns. And every new piece just made the picture darker. That's not shade. It's not hate. It's not some random dig thrown for drama. It's a pattern. And patterns are louder than feelings. Because once you step back and really look at the board, one uncomfortable question starts floating to the top. Is Claressa even his type, for real? Not the Instagram version, not the PR version, the real version. Because here's what history shows. For years, Remy protected that man like a shield. She polished his reputation, defended his name, smoothed over every crack before the public could see it. She helped manufacture the perfect husband myth. While behind closed doors, the behavior was telling a completely different story. Now that she's stepped back, now that she's no longer guarding the illusion, the picture forming isn't heroic. It's strategic, opportunistic, unfaithful. Image obsessed. Always calculating how he looks instead of what he is. That's not an attack. That's what the timeline suggests. And when you line up the receipts, the money trail, the overlaps, the sudden new connections whenever security shifts, it stops looking random. It starts looking deliberate. Then you look at Claressa, and what's happening there doesn't feel like love either. It feels like ego driving the car with no brakes. She's ignoring every warning sign, chasing validation, diving headfirst into a situation that's already on fire. A man still legally married, still tangled in multiple relationships, still carrying unfinished drama, still trying to reboot a career that's been stalled for years. Kids close to her age, complicated baggage, emotional loose ends everywhere. And she's out here auditioning for a wife like it's a role to win. Meanwhile, he's playing the field, keeping options open, moving like nothing is locked in. From a psychological standpoint, that setup doesn't survive. It just doesn't. Not because of hate, not because of bias. Because behavior has math. And the math isn't matching. Patterns don't lie. People do. So when you zoom out, this never really reads like a love story. It reads like branding. A relationship packaged for optics. A public narrative that collapsed the second pressure got applied. And there's a lesson buried in all of this. Always watch the patterns. They tell the truth long before people ever open their mouths. Because when you peel away the romance, the captions, the staged photos, the interviews, what's left isn't confusion. It's clarity. This saga was never just about cheating. It was about identity, power, access, control of the narrative. Remy didn't suddenly become bitter. She just stopped protecting the illusion. She stopped playing PR. And once that black love shield cracked, everything real underneath spilled out. All the stuff that had been hidden for years. And Claressa? This isn't some fairy tale about winning the man. It's a warning label. Because love doesn't require additions. Loyalty doesn't require competition. And healthy relationships don't grow in secrecy, denial, and overlapping timelines. That's not romance. That's image management. And image management always collapses eventually. Every time. Now, let's keep something clear and grown. Everything here is based on what's already public: interviews, statements, timelines, screenshots, things people themselves put out there. Nobody's diagnosing anybody. Nobody's condemning anybody. This is analysis, observation, context. If new information drops, perspectives can change. That's how logic works. But if you've ever watched a relationship blow up and later realized the red flags were waving the entire time, then you already understand this conversation. It's always in the patterns. So keep it respectful. Keep it thoughtful. Drop what stood out to you. If this breakdown made you think a little deeper, hit the like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And even if you didn't fully agree, stick around anyway. Because these stories aren't just gossip. They're lessons. At the end of the day, this was never only about celebrities. It was about truth versus image. About how love, ego, and branding blur together until nobody can tell what's real anymore. It's messy. It's human. It's uncomfortable. But it's honest. Because not everything that shines is solid. And not everyone smiling in public is standing on truth behind closed doors. Remy Ma, Papoose, Claressa Shields. 3 names. 1 cautionary tale. Watch actions, not captions. Because when you really pay attention, the truth always speaks louder than the image. I'll catch you in the next one.